Hello, I am Investigator NZ0. Welcome to your podcast Latin Macabre Stories and more. Remember to read the warning notice in the description before listening. If you are new, pause, read, and continue. I invite you to follow us on YouTube. Thank you for following us, commenting and liking us here YouTube. Listen and visualize the following in your mind. Anonymous supernatural experiences. Ghost possession. This story happened to me several years ago, when I was going to work. I usually left very early, around 5:45, since I started work at 7. He worked on Dick's Plant 3. My parents' house is located on the banks, in the Refuge neighborhood, and a few streets away is the Pantheon, and it reaches Pantheon Street. When I saw that several people were coming and were heading to the same Pantheon, I kept looking because it caught my attention that they were carrying a cart with wooden wheels, and where they were moving they made a lot of noise with the stones, since the street was not paved. And as I was looking, I realized that there was a dead man in the cart. When I saw her, I thought it was a funeral at this hour, but I kept walking. I didn't cross paths with them. I passed by and realized that there weren't many people. There were really few. They weren't talking or anything. They were just walking. The women had their faces covered with veils or black shawls, and the men wore hats and looked straight ahead. I felt a lot of chills when they had passed, and when I turned around out of curiosity, I kept seeing the people walking towards the Pantheon. I continued walking a little more and turned around again, and there was no one, nor the noise of the cartwheels that was heard before. I was shocked. I didn't believe he had turned around so quickly, and out of nowhere the noise stopped being heard. I left very quickly, nervous and scared. When I arrived at night, I told my mother, but she told me that at that time no one is buried, and even less do they use carts of that style, at least not now. Probably what he had seen that day was a ghost procession. Fortunately, I never had to see anything like that again, even though I went that way for a long time. Paranormal experiences. Good evening, my name is Pedro, and I will tell you about my experience. The company I work for is dedicated to transportation, the staff of almost the entire industrial port of Altamira, because everything was really normal. Day shift taxi coordinator tax. The problem started when they changed my shift, and they had to assign me a schedule from 5:30 p.m. to 5:30 a.m. I had never worked at night in my life, and you can imagine my colleagues on the night shift. On my first day, they began to tell me that at night they were scared, as they don't know, by the gift in quotes that I have, if you can call it a gift, at being able to see people who have already died. Anyway, night comes and around 2 o'clock the transport service calms down, and you can sleep for a while. The strangest thing is that no one of the 5 operators stayed in the office with me. They preferred to sleep in one of the vans, and together I only stayed in said office and didn't see anything strange. At dawn they asked me what's up, how did it go with the similar one. My response was that I had totally seen nothing. After a few days everything changed. I was still alone in the office, and in the early morning I saw a silhouette of a woman pass through one of the windows. I stopped and saw how the one who came to where my sleeping companions were. One night another colleague from the day shift was running late and asked for permission to stay the night in the office. He didn't know what his companions of the night were saying, and he stayed the night. Suddenly, that same night, I hear noises, and in the darkness I see a silhouette heading towards where my partner was. At the moment I thought it was one of the other classmates who wanted to scare him away, and when I looked at my cell phone the time showed 3:33. At that moment I felt a strong chill. It runs down my neck to my feet. I yelled, "Hey, what do you want?" That person turns around quickly and almost immediately turns into a huge cat and jumps out of one of the windows. The truth is that those are quite strange events that I have had to experience in that place. Not long ago they just gave us a new office, with all the comforts, with everything essential to be able to rest. First day, yes, all my colleagues stayed, but they all had nightmares and said they saw shadows, and it's been 3 weeks since they gave me the office and I'm still alone. They feel safer inside the van. I have tried to communicate with them, the ghosts, and I haven't had any answers. I clarified that I do not have the necessary experience to do so, but I do see them, but I cannot hear them. I'm looking for someone to support me in that aspect. Another more current experience was what happened to me on Saturday. This month, I went to visit my mother, who has recently had surgery and is caring for one of my sisters by inviting me for a cup of coffee. Well, it's the dining room, and it would be a surprise to see my sister's father-in-law go from a bedroom to the bathroom. My mind worked at a mile an hour. I called him and greeted him out loud, but I remembered that my brother's father-in-law had died a year and a half ago, and it wasn't just once, but twice that I saw him pass by. It's the bathroom. He smiled at me and raised his hands in greeting. This may not be a scary story, but it is what I want to tell you. They can search and search for cases of ghosts, spirits, farmers, diabolical entities. But one thing is clear to me, that not all of us can see them. More than once I learned of many appearances of winged beings that were frequently seen on electrical towers, radio or television signal towers, and in general high places. People reported seeing some type of animal with enormous wings, with a human appearance that hovered around the silos and with unclear intentions. Many of these people report seeing him at the radio tower in Pueblo Viejo and others on Avenida de las Torres, wandering among the cables and electrical towers, harassing night owls, causing them fear and involuntary accidents. Many people began to speculate about these beings. They said it was some kind of gargoyle. Others, who were witches or nawals who emerged from the old town lagoon to steal animals, scare people. Others commented that they were huge birds that had escaped from some zoo located in some large mansion of some politician or drug trafficker. The truth is that more than one person claims to have seen it in places away from noise and people. One of these stories mentions that a day laborer was returning from spending time in the central neighborhoods of Tampico. He lived in the vicinity of Tampico Alto, and since he had run out of money for the taxi, he decided to walk down Benito Juarez Street, and when he arrived at the transmission antenna, he noticed something unusual high up. In addition to the buzzards, he saw the black shadow of some kind of huge bird that spread its wings. Feeling some fear, he quickened his pace until he reached the plaza of Pueblo Viejo and sat down to meditate on what he had seen. The drunkenness had passed, and he was now thinking clearly. He decided to continue. He crossed the military field, and when he reached a huge tree located near the cemetery, he again saw the shadow of the bird flying through the sky. But he lived with anguish that the body was not that of a common bird, it was something human. The man's long legs and winged arms made him run along the road until he reached a gap. He decided not to go that way and walked along the entire road until he reached the military detachment, where, scared, he told the soldiers what had happened, not believing the words and attributing his strange visions to the effects of alcohol or some drug. However, after that night, people who live near the gap have said that at night they hear strange squawks from an unknown bird and the flapping of large wings crossing the night sky. Would you dare to go to that place at night? Putrid smell. In my mother's house there was a guest room, which was never used. It was generally used with a winery since its construction. About 10 years ago we began to smell an extremely strange rotten smell. It's like rotten meat or rotten fish. I haven't been able to figure it out yet, but I remember it perfectly. It is a penetrating smell. That smell drove us crazy. We searched for it, but without any source of success. The worst happened later. The door of said room opened onto the study where we did schoolwork. This door was always open and due to a bad arrangement. Maybe when we closed it, it always opened, therefore it always stayed that way. When we were in the studio, we couldn't help but have the feeling that someone was watching you from the darkness of the room. I practically always felt this way. I once invited a friend over who bragged about feeling these kinds of things. We went up to the study and were using the computer when suddenly, without me telling him anything, he discreetly began to look towards the room. It became more and more evident. He kept turning around until I asked him, "Did you feel it?" And he tells me that yes, that someone was watching him and that he was not very friendly. I once slept in that room, and during the night, when I tried to sleep, I heard the echo of my breathing. It gave me a little grace until I held my breath and it continued to sound dry. I was quite scared, but I was so tired that I decided to sleep like this. We cleaned the room. We took out everything that was in it, and we checked each of the things. We painted the room again, and yet the smell continued. We could not find any source of said smell. Some time later, a witch came to check the house. We did not tell him that the room was the one that had said phenomenon. However, it was she who felt that there was indeed something inside the room. A séance was held, and apparently there were two entities. Something really bad, and the other one, which was what we assumed, was an aunt who had passed away a long time ago and who took care of us. The witch did some rituals and cleaned the room. She asked us to bring a priest to bless the house, and we did so. After this, the smell completely disappeared, and we stopped feeling like they were no longer watching us, and that feeling changed to a very great peace. My mother later turned that room into a religious sanctuary. Until now, this story has remained in the past, but I share it with you. Follow us, subscribe, and share on YouTube. This helps me continue with this project. Give your opinion. In the description, you will find the emails to send your stories in case you like to share them. I appreciate your preference. Until the next episode. Latin macabre stories and more.